Hi, I'm Carmen,
And I'm Steven, and this is Vienna Past and Present.
where we walk through the gilded and sometimes not so gilded halls of Vienna's history.
I'm just going to caution everyone, the carpets are being replaced in my building, so there's lots of banging happening. You're going to hear a little bit of that. You're also going to hear my dog, Bo, replying to the people he thinks are knocking. So sorry about any background noise, but yeah, here's some Seattle sounds. We're going to try something a bit different this week. We're calling this a Zeitgeist episode, and it will be a more relaxed, more news and personal news focused, and hopefully just an easy listen.
Yeah, we're mixing it up a little bit this time. See how it goes.
Yeah. Okay, so Carmen, Austria is one of those countries that does a summer break, like many European countries, potentially all of them. We also took kind of an unannounced summer break. Now we're easing our way back in. Carmen, can you tell us, what is summer break like in Vienna?
So Vienna, Austria, I don't know that we officially have a summer break. You know, it's not really called officially a summer break, but effectively...
It's not even called it. Okay, already bombshells.
No, but nobody's around, so it effectively is a summer break. So, everybody's kind of taking vacations at different times, but effectively, I think in August, if you're trying to do any kind of business in Vienna, good luck, because nobody's around. Half the restaurants are closed because they're on some kind of summer hiatus, and everybody's at the seaside in Croatia or Italy or Greece.
So it's not even called summer break, though?
No, not really.
Sorry I'm hanging on this. Is it just like, oh, well, we can't do that then because it's August? Like, what would you say?
Yeah, pretty much.
Really? Okay. All right. So in some ways, that's even more sort of deep-seated and assumed, which I kind of like. Like, it doesn't even need a name. Okay.
Yeah, so there is a term that's used in German. People will say it's the Sommerloch, which means it's the summer hole. There's just nothing happening. It's a hole in the schedule. Like, don't even try to schedule a meeting. It's the Sommerloch.
Okay.
Come back in September if you want something done, I think is the basic message.
Okay, nice. As an American, definitely jealous.
Although I will say the Sommerloch extends, I would say, from July into August. And even parts of June. The summer vacations, they go for a long time.
Okay, I would say the closest thing that feels similar, I worked at a bank for many years, like a big bank. And in December, there is this feeling, it's like, okay, in December, nothing's going to happen. Because at the bank, everyone's using their vacation that they, had accumulated but not used during the year. It was like a use it or lose it company. And really, it was like that between Thanksgiving, so end of November in America, to, end of December, first week of January sometimes too. It's the same kind of thing. It's like, oh, there's trips, and then there's like people adding a little bit. Okay, so maybe I know the feeling slightly, but, our December loch is just like not as beautiful, or, the weather's not as nice.
It's less Croatia friendly, I guess.
Yeah.
But that was at the end of the year just because people had collected their vacation and couldn't roll it over to the next year.
Yeah, and it was like specific to that company for sure. But then I would ask other people at banks, and they're like, well, yeah, this is something that happens at banks, right? It's all these people who are like, oh, well, I'm going to take a trip, and then maybe they don't. And then it becomes this thing where, you have a couple of days off at the end of the year, so you want to extend it, so you like save a week, and then you're trying to also maybe travel during the the holiday season, and you don't want to pay like $1,800 to go somewhere boring, which was my case for a couple of years as well, like flying back to the Midwest. So yeah, I want to say it's bank specific, but there's a bunch of other industries that kind of happens to. So yeah, but not quite as nice.
Yeah, okay. I will say it's like a little extra pronounced maybe at the place where I work now, because you can collect days off as well. Like if you're working overtime, you can then take those days off as vacation days. And so people, I don't know, a bunch of people who I work with are on like 3-week, 4-week, 5-week vacations, which is unusual even for
Wow.
Vienna. Normally it's like 2 weeks, 3 weeks is kind of normal-ish that people will take off in the summer. But I don't know. At this company, people are just like, okay, bye. I'm just gone for like 5 weeks.
All right. Okay. Sounds good to me.
So it's kind of extreme.
And speaking of, you were gone as well. You grew up in the U.S. Now you've lived away for a while. You were back here in the Detroit area. So you've been living in Vienna for 10 plus years now. How does it feel to be back now in 2024?
Yeah, it's always interesting to come back. Right. So as you say, I grew up in Michigan in the Detroit area. And of course, I've come back semi-regularly over the years. But then COVID kind of, was an extended period where I didn't come to the US for a couple of years or came less. And so, yeah, now coming back, I do notice it's really, and over time you start to notice different things that you get used to in the place that you're living. So I've been in Austria now for a long time. I've gotten used to so many things that I think were initially maybe strange for me when I moved here. Now when I go to the US, I'm like, what is going on here, right? So you always have that bit of reverse culture shock, I think. But just as a bit of background, I did grow up in the US, but I'm from Austria. My parents are Austrian, and so we would always come for summer vacations to Austria when I was growing up. And now it's like a little bit reversed, right? Now I live here and I come to the US for my summer vacations, for my like extended 4-week holidays. And yeah, I mean, it's always super, super nice to be back and see family and friends, of course. That's kind of the main reason that I come. But I did quite a bit of travel this time, too, with you and with some other people as well. And so I saw a bit more of the U.S. this time around than I normally do.
Yeah, came to Seattle, went to Vancouver for the first time, Vancouver, Canada. So, yeah, and the weather was nice for you, thank God.
Yes, the weather held up for me. And yeah, so I mean, I spent quite a bit of time in Michigan, and there are some things that I really do notice. But even within the US, there are differences, right, depending on where you are. But one thing that I do notice so much now is the use of plastic in the US, which is just so much more widespread. And it just feels like it hasn't changed at all since, the early 2000s when I lived there. And in Austria, you really don't have single-use plastic anymore, or it's very, very rare. You pretty much never get a plastic cup anywhere. There's no plastic straws. Things are not really wrapped in plastic.
What do you get? Like, if you get a
paper.
Okay. Like if you get a coffee to go, which I guess people don't get, right? But like, should you try to work that out? You get it in a paper cup?
Yes, it's a paper cup. There is a plastic, like the top cap, what's it called?
Cover,
like the top
cap, I don't know.
Cover thing, cap, whatever. That is plastic, because I guess it would be hard to make it out of something else. But the cup itself is paper. Straws these days are paper. And then they've started doing these, disposable forks and knives that are either out of wood or some are made out of this like really compressed. I think it's also wood, actually. I don't know what it is exactly. It feels like plastic and it kind of looks like plastic, but it's not actually plastic. It's just like extremely compressed something. I don't know what it is. So that is one thing I notice in the US, and particularly in the Midwest, in Michigan, the use of plastic is really extreme. I went with my parents to this like cider mill out in the middle of nowhere, and we sat down, like we were in their tasting room, and we sat down to have a drink and to have a meal, and they brought out the drinks in plastic cups. And it was like, well, we're drinking here. And they were like, yeah, no, we just have plastic cups. We don't even have regular glasses. Wow. And it's like, I mean, aside from the fact that you're drinking cider out of a plastic cup, which is not the classiest thing in the world, like it's so wasteful too. It's very bizarre. So that is something that really wouldn't happen in Austria.
Yeah, that kind of thing is jarring when you experience it, right? Because I think Seattle is a little bit more toward that Vienna side, and I don't know if it's good necessarily, but it's like, in the city we don't have plastic bags anymore, right? I think it's not legal to have those. We have paper only that we have to pay for, things like that. So we have that. We definitely there's some of those wooden utensils, but there's a lot of there are plastic utensils too, but there are also these like some kind of biodegradable, like bioplastic, whatever that means, right? But it's like something that is then compostable. And then I'll go other places and it's kind of shocking. Like, it's weird. Like even in New York, I remember, this was not that recent. It was a couple years ago. A friend living in Manhattan in a high-rise apartment. He's just like, oh, our building just doesn't have recycling. And I mean, now that I'm saying that, I'm like, wait, is he just lazy? He might be. Actually, like knowing this person, I'm like, wait. But I think that's true. I'd heard that from someone else as well, where they're just kind of like, oh yeah, certain buildings aren't equipped for it, and places that you'd think would be so so used to that, so able to do that, and there's the political will and everything. Like sometimes they just don't. So yeah, change is hard. Change is maybe harder for some countries than others.
Yeah, although, I mean, like you said, I really noticed the difference between Michigan and Seattle as well.
Okay.
Like in Seattle, there is more, I think, of a environmentally conscious population, right? And the people are a little bit more aware of it. And there's less plastic there. I mean, I noticed that. But on the point of recycling, I mean, actually, Vienna is kind of like that too. Vienna I think recycles less than the surrounding areas in Austria, because I know, when I have various family coming or when you're out in the countryside, people, they sort out all kinds of garbage and they have all their recycling.
Oh.
And in Vienna, we do a lot less of it too, which is actually kind of surprising. I never thought about it that much. But yeah, the Viennese don't take the recycling that seriously.
Okay, interesting.
Which is kind of not what you would expect somehow. But maybe it just gets too complicated with that amount of people or something, like the density.
Yeah. So on a more personal note, I live in Seattle. I have not had air conditioning for the last couple years. This year, I kind of broke down. There was a really hot weekend. I'm like, okay, I don't even want like 5 of these weekends again. It just seemed like it was going to be a really hot summer. I installed AC. I don't run it all the time or something, but it really has made a difference. I like it. Any air conditioning difference that you notice?
Yeah, it's pretty extreme.
Okay.
In Vienna, a lot more people are getting air conditioning because it's just getting so hot in the summers and you kind of just die. And a lot of the apartments, a lot of stuff in Vienna is really built much more for winter than it is for summer. So it retains the heat really well, which, is great in winter, but really not good in summer. So a lot of more modern apartments do have air conditioning, but one major difference is that, in shops and offices and stuff like that, you also have air conditioning. But in Austria, you only air conditioned to like 10 degrees, maybe max, colder than it is outside.
Okay.
Actually, probably even less. You kind of only cool it down a couple of degrees from whatever the outdoor temperature is. So you never have this massive contrast between outdoor temperature and indoor temperature. And in the US, I froze every place I went. I had to bring a sweater every time I went anywhere because when I went inside, I was freezing.
Yeah.
So to put it in Celsius terms, it'd be like 33 degrees outside and then like 20 degrees inside. Freezing, which I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, fake temperature units. What would that be ish? I don't know, like 90 outside and like 65 inside. It's crazy.
Well, yeah, that would just be the normal kind of guidance, I feel like. For a lot of businesses or something, it would be like, 68, or it would be less, right? Like they err on the side of too cold here. So, like versus too hot.
Yeah, it's just a massive contrast. I do notice that. But I have to say, I think I've become, when I was a kid, we would always make fun of our Austrian relatives when they came to visit us in the US because they would always be going on and on about the air conditioning and how it would make them sick and that they were going to get a cold because the air conditioning was turned up too high. And we always made fun of them, like, oh, these weak Austrians that can't handle anything and like don't understand germ theory, and we would just make fun of them.
Yeah, this is a key, Carmen story, right? If someone's like, I'm getting sick, you're making fun of them. Okay, just something you need to know about you. Kidding, sort of.
Yeah, but that's totally me now. Now I'm that lame-ass Austrian that's like, oh, I'm going to get sick. Somebody give me a coat. Or
God,
a scarf.
Their revenge so fast.
The Austrians are always wearing scarves to like ward off some kind of sickness. Yeah.
Huh?
Yes.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't really do that, but...
You're also a Cybertruck fangirl?
Yeah. Well, no.
Just
no,
kidding.
I don't really know anything about them. I kind of know they exist. But yeah, when I was in the US now, I saw 2 of them. One of them is in the neighborhood that my parents live in. So I saw that one many times because it was just parked in the driveway the whole time because it's too big to fit in any garage.
I love that tone. I saw 2 of them. It's like not 1, 2.
And they are even stupider looking in real life, if I may say so myself. That's just my opinion.
Polarizing. Yeah. It's not really my thing either. But
it feels very American, I have to say. It reminds me of the Aztec. I don't know if you remember that car from like the early 2000s.
Who could forget? It is a little bit Aztec-y, actually.
Yeah. But like worse.
I don't know. Yeah, that kind of brings it down for me a little bit, but I can't really argue with that.
Yeah. And I don't think that's a car that would ever really fly in Europe. I don't even know if they're trying to sell them. I feel like it would not be legal. Like, I don't even know
TikTok,
how.
we'll see, okay? It's going to be like Pez. All of a sudden, you're going to see them everywhere. All
yeah,
right.
but don't they meet,
Good luck.
almost none of the... Can't you, cut your finger off with, the sharp edges or something? I don't know.
I don't think that's true. Something tells me that's not true.
It looks like it could be true.
But, yeah,
Okay, maybe not.
Okay.
But that felt very American, I have to say. Just this, massive, sort of oversized... kind of ridiculous car. And anyway, that kind of size car, you just don't see in Europe. There's no place to park. Where are you going to put that thing?
Yeah, okay. And I guess I don't have a sense of how big they are. They don't look small, though. Yeah.
Oh no, they're like gigantic. Have you not seen one in person?
I've seen one like on the road, but I don't know if it didn't strike me as like crazy big. It just was kind of like weird shaped. It was like high yet a small roof. It's kind of seemed like, it was just like a strange silhouette. Yeah, I don't know. But okay, if they're big, I mean, that's not
Yeah, it's a
probably
very
not helpful.
no. I don't know where you would park that
Right.
thing, and yeah. So I noticed that, and cars in general, just like how well some things are changing. I
Hmm.
think. Obviously, Detroit is very, very car oriented. I mean, no surprise there. But I did take the Q line, so the one and only light rail tram
Oh,
line that now exists in
okay.
Detroit, which opened a couple of years ago, I think. I've actually taken it before. I was in Detroit right around when it opened a couple of years ago, so I took it kind of immediately in those first couple of weeks. And then this time around, I also took the Q line because I went out to dinner in downtown.
Maybe you're one of its most loyal riders. Okay.
I know. I think I might be. I might be one of like the top 10
Yeah.
frequent riders of this thing. I show up every 2 years and take one ride, and that already makes
Okay,
me.
and just an aside here, like this is not a show about Detroit. I have a friend who works in transit here in Seattle. There's something called the People Mover in Detroit. We both thought that the People Mover was like a Detroit branded idea, only there where people moved. You know what I mean by People Mover. He then tells us, he's like, oh no, People Mover is like this. It's like just a generic like noun for like a kind of transit. And I was scandalized. I was like, what? This was the most important like special thing about Detroit Transit to me. Okay, which is not have a whole lot going for it that I know of. Sad.
Me too. I always was like, I wish I was in that meeting where they were like, what are we going to call this thing? Oh, it moves people. Let's call it a people mover. No, it turns out it's a totally standard term.
Yeah, now we know it'd be a very boring meeting. They were just like, oh, what's it already called?
Let's be too lazy to
Okay.
come up with a real name for it. Okay,
God.
people mover.
Yeah, let's just keep it. Too
So I
bad.
did not people move this time around, I have to say. I only took the Q line. But yeah, the public transport situation in the US is pretty lacking. That's also one thing that is very noticeable, especially in the Detroit area.
Yeah, and in some ways those are big extremes or like big contrasts, right? Going from the most livable city in the world, like 300 years running or whatever, to Detroit. Which is like, it Detroit is experiencing a bunch of renewal, right? We're not trying to like dog on Detroit, right? But we also both have lived there, so we can tease it, okay?
I mean, we can,
We can tease it
but I
and
will say
respect
that
it.
Detroit has a lot going on at the moment. I mean, I went out and I mean, it was hopping. There were people out. I mean, there were a million of these super annoying,
Cool.
like beer pedal bikes or whatever. What are they called?
Okay, listen, that is a part of
What is
every
up with
city's
that?
development, okay? There will be those, okay? It's just a part of
I
gentrification, okay? Love it or hate it, it's gonna happen. And then the bubble will burst, and then they will open up axe throwing bars or something like that, okay? So just wait for the
Okay,
next
yeah, that's the
stages.
level of gentrification Detroit is at. It's like beer bike. What are they called?
Beer trolley or something like that, something like that.
They are everywhere. But like, there's a lot of cool bars and stuff now, and you really can go out, which I feel like you couldn't do 15 years ago. At least not in the same way.
Yeah. Okay. And the people on these little beer trolleys, they are friendlier. You said something about the friendliness of Americans, like the chit chattiness with people you do not know compared to in
Yeah,
Vienna.
I mean, we avoided the people on the beer trolleys. We didn't try to interact with them. Um,
Oh,
but on the
okay.
whole, yeah, that's always noticeable how friendly Americans are and how much they just kind of talk to you on the street, tell you that they like your shoes or your pants or whatever. They always come up with some reason to say something. And then you have a little chat and then you move on with your day. And that just does not happen in Vienna. In Vienna, it's like, why are you talking to me?
No one ever says in Vienna that they're not like, I like your pants. Like, that doesn't happen
No,
in Vienna.
it's like
Hmm. Okay, it's too bad.
maybe just nobody likes my pants here. I mean, I don't know, but it's like never happened.
Wow. I didn't go there, but I like that.
No, Viennese are
Okay,
much
and
more standoffish. They just don't. It's like unless you're asking for directions or no, you just don't randomly talk to people. I don't know. And it is really interesting because you
hmm.
made the point before about the most livable city, and it does constantly get ranked as the most livable city. But the people here always say, well, yeah, but only if you kind of, don't include the Viennese. It's like a great city if not for the people, because like they're pretty grumpy and they're not the
Oh,
friendliest.
wow. Okay. So most livable until those test criteria are updated. So, watch out. All right.
Hmm. Yeah.
And just before we wrap this up, I have heard before, okay, not scientific, just trying to get your read here. I've heard that Seattle has a bit more of a European vibe than some other American cities. This is not something I invented. I didn't ask anyone this. This was offered to me once or twice now by people who have lived in Europe, people who are European. It surprised me, but now I like the idea. Okay, I'll be honest. But what's your take on that? It's just so far from Europe. You know what I mean? Like what?
Yeah,
But
I would not expect the West Coast really to be very European. I always sort of thought, okay, East Coast, like cities like Boston have a bit of a European vibe, or DC, I think, has a sort of European vibe in some cases, or, in some ways. But Seattle, I actually can really see it. I mean, partially, Seattle's very liberal. So I think just the attitude towards things is a little bit more European in some ways. I mean,
right.
we already talked about use of plastic and a little bit more of an environmental approach than, the Midwest or other parts of the US. And even, I don't know, somehow, I wouldn't say that the buildings or the architecture is like particularly European, but it does have some kind of more European vibe, I think, than a lot of other places in the US. So I could sign on to that.
Okay. Yeah, again, I'm not making some like claim here. I'm just exploring this question. But yeah, to me, when I thought about that, I was like, oh, is it sort of like we have this, there's like a lot of farmers markets here. Maybe it's kind of like there's this European-ish attitude toward food, maybe, relatively something like that. There is more transit here. There is like more walkability. I don't know, but that's kind of the stuff that I think of when I consider that. But okay.
Yeah, and I think that's basically right. I think there's also a little bit more of there is a coffee
Mm-hmm.
culture there,
Oh, okay. Thought of that. Yeah.
right? For the US. I mean, it's probably, I'd say, sort of the heart of coffee culture in the
We'll take
US.
it. Seattle
Would you
people
agree
love
with that?
that. Okay, no more questions. Seattle's the beating heart of American coffee culture. All right.
It has been decreed,
That's
yes,
right.
that's how it
Don't
is.
yeah, don't add us. Yeah.
But I think there is more of that culture of go and have a coffee and just kind of hang out, and you want like a very good coffee. And there's a whole kind of lifestyle around coffee,
Yeah,
right?
that's
And I
true.
think that's kind of European too, which is spreading maybe to other parts of the US, but
Oh, I think it is. I think it is. Okay, our final, perhaps most important story, Taylor Swift. In case anyone didn't hear, and I doubt that because Taylor Swift news seems to reach fans and non fans, she abruptly canceled two or three, I'm not quite sure, shows in Vienna that would have drawn something like 200,000 people due to this credible terrorism threat to the venue that I guess like the CIA informed them and like, Austrian state police or whatever, right? That's just huge, and I think that was the biggest Vienna news for the past month or so, probably. Um, so what did you hear in Austria? Like any more news for us? I feel like there's not a whole lot about it. Except that there was, they found some materials, and there were a couple people, and they, you know, were sharing private messages that the police maybe won't access or can't. Did you hear anything else?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's about it. I was in the US when this news broke, and it was three shows that she was
Okay.
supposed to do in Vienna. I mean, I wasn't going to go to any of them, so, I wasn't paying that much attention to the whole thing. But obviously, it was big news. And I was working from the US as well for like part of the time that I was there. And so when that news broke, I was working. And so I had a meeting with, some of the people in my team who live in Vienna, and I kind of talked to them about it. And I mean, yeah, people were kind of shocked. It's really not on people's radars at this stage, I think. There was a terrorist attack a few years ago, if you remember. I think it was 2000. Oh, it was during COVID lockdowns, 2021,
Okay.
maybe?
I don't recall that one actually.
Must,
What was it, like
or,
a transit one or something?
No, no, no. It was God, if I recall correctly, I was out that night and I was not far away from it. So we had these lockdowns in Vienna, right? And so we had quite a long, the first lockdown during COVID was quite a long lockdown. And then they kind of eased some of the restrictions so that you could go to restaurants again, but you had to wear a mask and all that stuff. And then the cases started rising again. And so then they announced that there was going to be another hard lockdown with all restaurants closed, basically all shops except for super essential stuff, everything closed. And the night before this lockdown was set to start, a lot of people went out in the city for like one last dinner, one last drink to go out and meet friends. And I went out as well.
Oh.
I mean, I did the same thing. So I was like part of that whole
Mm-hmm.
crowd. And yeah, there was a guy who just like had a gun and ran through like a part of the first district, like the city center, and just was shooting people like indiscriminately.
Wow.
And a couple of people died. I don't remember the details now. I mean, a few people died, other people injured. I mean, very shocking, not something that had happened in Vienna before and not something that people were, expecting at
Mm-hmm.
all. And then there was a manhunt for this person, so he was kind of like out just around. And so there was this hunt to find him. I think it was two people maybe, or one guy. God, I don't remember the details that well.
Okay.
But in any case, that was kind of the big terror attack that happened here.
Okay. So it's happened recently in Vienna. All right.
Yeah, that was the one terrorist, like, kind of main attack that happened. So it was a couple of years ago, but then, and then for a while, people were very nervous about it. It was then also a lockdown, though, so you couldn't go out anyway, right? So after that, it kind of made news for a while and then, kind of dropped off. And then I don't think it's been on anybody's radar, really. I mean, it hasn't been on mine at least. Interestingly, just before I left for the US, I was talking to a colleague of mine about the Paris Olympics. And he randomly was like, oh, I feel like there could be a terrorist attack there.
Okay.
And I was like, what? Like, I don't know. I kind of dismissed it and was like, okay, I don't know. Like, not something that I was thinking of at all. And then, of course, there was nothing there, but there was this situation in Vienna with the concerts being canceled. And there was a guy who was arrested. I think there's 2 or 3 further people who seem to have been involved. And now there's all these investigations going on. But yeah, it was very shocking to people. Taylor Swift has had concerts all over the world in like every big venue, right? And then in Vienna, for some reason, it all got canceled because of apparently a very credible terrorist threat. Really strange.
Yeah, you just think of that as like one of the safest big cities. Again, is that like this, oh, it's so livable kind of image that it has? I don't know what or like why, but
Yeah, somehow.
yeah, that it made it more surprising somehow. So is it in the news still now? Is it like there are stories that trickle in, or is it not really a news thing because it didn't happen?
Yeah,
Or
I mean, it's
something like
dropped
that.
off the news a little bit. Every now and then I've seen some headlines the last couple days about, this person that they've arrested and whatever the investigation. I mean, I have to say, I didn't really read the articles. I'm also not
Okay.
much of a Swiftie, so can't say I'm like super involved in any of this.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, but nobody's talking about it, like at work or whatever. I mean, nobody actually has mentioned it since I've come back. So it's not a big topic of conversation, although I think it's a little bit in the news. But one thing that was very nice,
Okay, and there was
I just wanted to say one thing that apparently did happen is that Swifties or people who were going to go to these concerts, they just congregated in various places in the city, in the streets, and held like their own little concerts where they were like singing Taylor Swift songs and exchanging these bracelets, which I guess is a
oh,
thing people do at the concerts or something.
okay.
And so they just did it sort of on their
Okay.
own in the streets. And that was a bit of a news item for a while, for these couple of days, that, people
Hmm.
were meeting up anyway and kind of creating an event for themselves, which, I mean, is a really nice thing that a bit of a community formed out of it.
That is cool, right? For all of my like lack of Taylor Swift knowledge, that always seems to be true. It's like always these like good-natured people posting things and like I don't know, it does seem like a very kind of good vibes sort of community. So That's really cool to hear, actually. All these Taylor Swift fans who are listening and must be like cringing their way through this as like the blind lead the blind. We're like, how do you, what's her name? Swift.
What does she
We're
do
like,
again?
we know, like, we're the extreme minority of people who know very little. But,
I know. Are we
yeah.
just too old, or like, what is our deal? I don't know. Neither one of
No,
us.
no, we're not. Coworkers who are like 15 or 20 years older than me, or like went to multiple shows here in Seattle.
Okay.
So no, we
We're
just
not,
lie out. We're in like some slightly different dimension
I guess.
where we just don't experience, the same thing. But hey, I think she has some good songs. Okay, I will say that. I'm not zero hostility.
Yeah, I like some of her songs.
Just
I just don't follow
yeah,
her in any particular way.
right.
Is it still a news story in the U.S.? I mean, how big of a thing do you think it was there?
No, not that I really have noticed. So the only news story here for a while was like, okay, it happened. Then there was a little news story that was like, Taylor Swift has not acknowledged it. But then she did kind of acknowledge it at the end of some leg of her tour, right? So like a month later or whatever, she was like, oh, this is the right thing to do. I'm sorry. This is the right thing. She kind of like said all the right things, kind of. Yeah, but that was really it. I want to say I then did a little bit of digging for this episode, and really the digging that I did, it was kind of in these like more international news sources that were kind of talking about the trial and the charges, right? But a lot less about the story from like Taylor Swift's perspective or like the perspective of American fans or anything like that. That seems to kind of be over already, which, hey, with such a massive potential incident, I guess that's good, that it was contained enough that it could blow over, at least for here, but whatever. That's my read of that.
Okay, interesting. I mean, one thing that was interesting here too, actually, was that I think a week later or something, sort of right around the same time period, there was a Coldplay concert in Vienna at the same stadium, and that went
Okay.
off without a hitch. That was like not an issue. And so I think some people were a little bit kind of confused about that, and they were like, oh, the one thing was canceled and the other thing wasn't. And I mean, of course there's like conspiracy theories and whatever going around, which I don't exactly know what they're about, but
Maybe.
yeah, maybe we can get into the conspiracy theories at some point. Okay, maybe I gotta educate myself.
Well, and here I was tempted to make like a Coldplay, and like terrorism joke, but I won't. Okay, because I'm bigger than that. All right, so you fill in the blanks yourself. Okay. Okay, glad that didn't, glad nothing happened, of course.
It could have been a much bigger news story, so thankfully it wasn't. They seem to have nipped it in the bud.
Yeah, thank God. So to take this to like a slightly wonkier place before we wrap up here, we were talking earlier about Austrian privacy laws. I saw something about that in the news as well. So they're very strict compared to the US, certainly, I think, at least regarding text message privacy. So with this incident, right, where there were supposedly these messages, exchanged for planning this attack in WhatsApp, I think it was. Do you think this incident would change Austrian privacy attitudes at all toward this? Because my sense is that in the US, these are messages that could be like demanded and then looked at. But in Austrian, like law enforcement or like in that legal environment, that's not the case. Do you think Austrians would want to change that in light of that? Would they push for that? Would they even talk about it? Is privacy so sacred there that they wouldn't, even though 200,000 people would
potentially attacked?
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to say. I have not really heard it being discussed now, more than previously. But there is an election coming up now at the end of September. And I guess it is part of like the far right political platform, which are the parties that are anyway trying, to curb immigration and, are kind of very against the EU and all of this stuff. They, I think, are kind of trying to push this and kind of raise it as something that should change, that that the police can look into some of these messages to try to thwart these kind of attacks in a more effective way. Honestly, I do think the far right wing is going to get a lot of votes in this election. because like in a lot of other places, these populist parties or like pseudo-populist parties are on the rise, and there is this real backlash to a lot of the policies from the last years. So I mean, I do think the far right wing is probably going to do decently well in the election, but I don't think that privacy is going to be something that people are very willing to change. People are very concerned about their privacy. There's lots of laws restricting it.
Okay.
People are, compared to the US, I mean, people are much more concerned about it, and they don't want to be tracked, or they, the less that law enforcement and other agencies can look into this, the better, I think, for most people. And I don't think that's massively changed. I guess some political parties will try to exploit this a little bit and try to, push that narrative. But honestly, it would surprise me a lot if people were more open to this. I kind of doubt it.
Right. Okay. And I mean, that makes sense. That's just kind of an interesting, like, Austrian wrinkle to this. But okay, thank you for gazing into the crystal ball and just like attempting to answer the unanswerable. Okay.
Yeah, so the long story short is, I don't know.
Yeah, so that was a tough one.
But yeah,
all right.
I will say that privacy is
will
a big
hold you to
issue
that.
here,
Yeah.
and it is something that comes up a lot, and people are very, very, protective, I guess, of their privacy, of their security, of their data being used for different things. Yeah.
Okay. Possible future episode. That's what I'm hearing. Okay.
Yeah, and there's good historical reasons for that, which we can get into in like an actual episode on it.
On that note, I think that was our first Zeitgeist episode.
Yeah, so that's just what's going on with the spirit of the times, the Zeitgeist. What's kind of...
So now you're entirely caught up on us. You're entirely caught up on the summer hole, or whatever this is called.
Yeah, now we're back into...
It does not sound the same in English, okay? I should never say that. I should never say that again. Right, don't worry.
I know, even when I said it at the top of the episode, as I was thinking about translating it, I was like, God, it just doesn't sound right in English. The summer
doesn't
hole.
work.
Like, no.
Okay. If you've learned nothing else from this, that should be
It's
the
the
takeaway.
Sommerloch.
Okay. Some things just,
Maybe it just has to be a word like Zeitgeist. You just have to implant it wholesale.
Exactly.
There's no translation. Zeitgeist, Sommerloch.
Yeah. Don't you dare translate it. Yeah.
You just got to keep it as it is.
Okay.
Okay. So, I think, is there anything else from your end?
I think that's it. Everybody have a good week or two.
All right. And we're going to try to come back on a more regular schedule now that the Sommerloch has ended.
Yeah. Now that it's over.
Now that we got to get back to work and life and whatnot, we'll try to be a bit more regular. And I think that's it for our show today. So thank you for listening. And if you liked what you heard, then share with your friends or leave us a 5-star review. And if you didn't like it, then, as usual, don't worry about that review.
Right. You can find us on social medias, Vienna Past and Pres on Instagram, or send us your episode ideas at viennapastandpresent@gmail.com.
Auf Wiedersehen, pfiat euch, Baba.
Bye.